Here's the most aggressive and high win rate way to counter the Ruy Lopez. If you enjoy the Russo gambit versus the Italian, this is its stronger Spanish cousin, deadly and sound. Let me show you how it works. After pawn to f5, you're immediately attacking white's central pawn on e4, flipping the script. While white hoped for a slow, positional Ruy Lopez game, you're forcing a sharp tactical battle instead. White has three main options here. Capture the pawn on f5, a mistake. Continue the traditional Ruy Lopez plan by capturing the knight on c6 and then grabbing the undefended pawn on e5. Defend the e4 pawn with pawn to d3. Let's first look at the second option, if white trades on c6 with bishop takes knight on c6 and then plays knight takes pawn on e5. At first, it looks like black is in trouble, the pawn is gone, the king seems exposed. But here comes a powerful move, queen to d4. This move attacks both the knight on e5 and the pawn on e4. If the knight retreats, you can then capture the pawn on a4 with your bishop, checking the white king, a very annoying surprise. Plus, now that white traded on c6, your bishop is active on the diagonal. If white retreats the knight, no problem. You get your pawn back with check. And if white tries to get aggressive, many players go for queen to h5, thinking it's a winning threat. But you can simply defend, and now both of white's pieces are under attack. Black play knight takes pawn on g6, you just recapture. Now white is relying on a familiar tactic. Queen takes rook on h8, which in many similar positions can be winning. But not this time. It's funny how even 2,000 rated players fall for this blunder. They instinctively play queen takes h8, thinking it's a typical winning line, but here, it actually loses the game. Why? Because your queen is on d4, not on d8, so you can simply capture their queen with queen takes h8. It may look like a wild Fischer random setup, but it works beautifully. Now, your opponent doesn't have to lose their queen. They might instead play queen takes g6, checking your king, but you calmly move your king aside. Let's pause and assess the position. You're up a piece, and while your king looks exposed, it's actually safe. White has no follow-up because they're completely passive, only their queen is active. Meanwhile, you have several pieces surrounding your king, and you outnumber white in attacking force. Even worse for white, their own king is in danger. You still threaten checks like queen takes a4, and if they castle kingside, their king ends up sitting on the open h-file, perfect for launching your final attack. Now, in many cases, white will play pawn to d3, trying to defend their central pawn on e4 and also setting up a potential check with bishop to g5. They're still hoping for some sort of counterattack. Here, you can calmly develop with knight to e7. Your position is already better, so there's no need to memorize any specific line. You're gaining tempo by attacking their queen, targeting weak pawns, and opening the h-file for your rook. Everything is working in your favor. Let me walk you through one particularly impressive variation to show how dominant your position is. White might continue with bishop to g5, trying to pin your knight and build pressure. But this opens up a hidden weakness. Now the pawn on b2 is undefended. You can play b2 and next grab the rook on a 1, gaining even more material. Still, your opponent might stay hopeful and play bishop to f6. The idea is to attack your queen, x-ray your rook on h8, and maintain the pin on your knight. It looks dangerous at first, but here's the brilliant reply. Queen takes a 1. This clever move distracts the bishop from the pin. If white now captures your queen, you'll simply take theirs in return. And in the process, you end up with a huge material lead, extra pieces and a winning position, all while shutting down white's last hopes of counterplay. If white wants to avoid losing more material, they might choose to castle kingside, hoping they can at least generate some counterplay. They know they're down material, but they're trying to create pressure and stay in the game. But now comes a truly brutal move, one that Stockfish itself recommends as black's top choice. It's not just strong, it's humiliating. Queen to a5. This move threatens queen takes h2 checkmate, using the support of your rook on h8. If white tries to stop it by capturing your queen, then after knight takes g6, you enter an endgame with the purest form of the two bishops advantage, an incredibly powerful long-term asset. Now let's look at one of the most common traps white falls into. They often grab what looks like a free pawn with pawn on f5, but just like in the Russo gambit, it's a trap. You respond with pawn to e4, attacking the knight. Suddenly white is in trouble. They look for a square to retreat the knight, but realize there's no safe option. Your queen covers two key escape squares, while your knight controls the others. The only remaining option? Retreating the knight all the way back to g1, where it started the game. This is the ultimate time loss and positional defeat. White has no momentum, no development, and no attack, while you control the board with better pieces, threats, and tempo. Very often, white will choose to trade on c6, playing bishop takes knight, hoping to clear the way for their knight to move to a better square, but this trade actually helps you more than it helps them. Now your bishop becomes active on the diagonal and is perfectly placed to reclaim the pawn on f5. Once white moves their knight, you simply capture the f5 pawn, and suddenly you're holding a strong, active position. The knight on a 5 becomes slightly loose. It's far from its own pieces and can be targeted from multiple angles, either with your queen or your knight. From here you can continue calmly with knight to f6, then castle. Your setup is solid and aggressive. Interestingly, at this point, many white players, especially intermediate ones, go for queen to h5. It's a surprisingly sharp idea, and credit to them, they sometimes find it. The goal is to bait you into a mistake. White hopes that after you defend with pawn to g6, they can sacrifice their knight with knight takes g6. Now, two key variations arise. If you recapture with the h-pawn, you fall into a trap. White grabs the rook on h8 with queen takes h8. If you take with the bishop, white plays queen to a5, a double attack on your bishop and rook. At first glance, this looks clever, and you might feel like you've been tricked, but not so fast. You simply sidestep with your king. White captures the rook with queen takes h8, thinking they've won. But now comes the punishment. You shut the escape with bishop to g7, or another locking move, and capture their queen. You win back control and emerge with a material lead. There's also another tempting trap white might fall for, grabbing your seemingly free pawn in the center. But the moment they do, you respond with a central pawn push like pawn to d5. Now they face a major problem. Their knight is under attack, and options are limited. Some may try queen to a2, trying to pin your pawn and apply pressure, but again, you're one step ahead and ready with solid defenses and counterplay. The solution here is simple. Just play queen to e7. This unpins your pawn and defends it, making the threat of pawn takes knight very real. White will usually have to retreat their knight anyway. Now you unlock a powerful idea. Your knight jumps forward, creating multiple threats. White may try to hang on with queen to c4, but queen to e5 is a crushing reply, a double attack on their bishop and more. Although technically you're playing a gambit, you're mostly sacrificing your opponent's pieces. Many of you who enjoy the Russo gambit asked for something similar against the Ruy Lopez, and here it is. Some white players will try knight to d4, sacrificing the knight to open queen to f3 aiming for an attack, but you should absolutely accept the sacrifice. Unlike in the Russo gambit, white's bishop isn't on c4 to support queen to f7, so there's no real threat. You're simply up a piece. Even worse for white, their bishop and pawn on c2 are hanging, and the rook behind them is exposed. If the bishop retreats, you respond with pawn to d5, gaining tempo and space. When the bishop moves again, you keep attacking, knight to f5, queen to f4, and now g5 pushes the queen further. Before they know it, they're down a piece. Their queen is under fire, and next move, it's trapped. Thanks for watching.